So I wanted to make a little tutorial video on how I fly between Boulder and Golden, and today I was actually flying from Lookout towards Boulder, so the opposite of how I usually do it, but I go both ways, and it's a pretty similar strategy regardless of which way you fly. So what I hope to, or hope you get out of this is both the tactics and strategy on the cross country and sort of the flying skill side, but also familiarization with this line and especially where all the do not land areas, the DNLs, are that we've been talking about on the local chat groups. So I'm going to highlight where the places that are okay to land are, where the places that are totally not okay are, and how I try to connect them, and how you can identify these spots from the air and stay out of trouble on the way. So just a little background for this day. It was forecasted that Lookout was going to be a little bit better, which is why we're launching from here. We showed up at the hill at about 11 o'clock. People had already climbed out. Loopy was already on his way when we got to launch. So we were scrambling to set up, and I think I took off around 11:30, trying to catch up with everybody. So as soon as I took off, I got stuck kind of right at launch height, and I was just ridge soaring, just trying to survive, waiting to see for someone else to find a climb. I wasn't going to leave the safety of where I was to risk bombing out until I saw these guys catching a climb, so I went out and joined them. And immediately we were finding that it was pretty desperate below about 7,500 feet. The climbs are really broken. We were having trouble punching through the inversion. So right off the bat, I had some clues that there was going to be trouble if he got low today. So eventually we found a good climb, punched through the inversion, got high, and started the transition over to Mount Galbraith. So this is Mount Galbraith here, and when you do this transition, you want to make sure that you're high enough that you don't arrive on the lower flanks, because they don't tend to work super well. Ideally, you want to leave around 8,000 feet or so you get up high enough that you can work this terrain and have a few chances to find a climb. So I get over there, and I have to, the first climb doesn't really work, but the second one is where I pick it up. And something to note is just on the north side of these houses is the horse pasture. This is now sort of the LZ that you transition to. When you're going to keep going north, you're going to have this guy in mind that if you get low, that's where you're headed. All this stuff is the highway department. They don't like us landing there, so make sure when you're going to do this next transition that you're high enough to clear all that, and you're going to go over here next. So I'm going to climb up and try to see how high this day is going. I get into one of the better climbs compared to what I found at Lookout, so I want to see how high it's getting me. And meanwhile, I'm watching Loopy, who's kind of stuck down low over here. It's kind of hard to see in the video at this point, but I'm watching him just grovel down low. There he is, kind of in and out of the frame. So combined with what I found earlier, that's telling me I need to stay really high today and not get low, especially because I'm approaching the really critical DNL. So there's this little notch in the hogsbacks right where Highway 72 runs. Everything south of Highway 72, with the exception of that highway department, is mostly okay to land at. There's a few exceptions which are in the DNL file that's floating around. But the really critical area is north of Highway 72. So all this area west of 93 is the mine, and they don't like us landing there. And then north of the mine are the water department where the lakes are, and they don't like us there. And then a little bit further north is the Indian Head neighborhood, and there's one homeowner in particular who's very aggressive towards paragliders. You need to absolutely stay away from anywhere remotely close to this spot. But you also have the White Ranch open space, which is also a DNL. So you have this huge, massive area that extends all the way to Coal Creek Canyon, which is kind of hard to see from here. And a lot of times it takes 2 or 3 climbs to pass this section. So for people who haven't done this or don't have a lot of XC skills or on a lower glider, you really want to have a day that's getting pretty high reliably. Like I would say to do this, unless you have a lot of experience, you want to be getting to at least 10,000 feet pretty easily. I'm not getting that high today, but I've flown this line a lot and I have a high performance glider. If you don't have that kind of setup where you're getting really high and you have a good glider, the more conservative option is to fly out in front, kind of along 93, or at least staying enough on the front line that you can bail out to 93 if you have to. I'm going to be flying the deep line today because of how stable it is down low. I know that it's just not likely to work if I stay out there. So I'm trusting in my experience and my abilities to milk the climbs and stay high. So I still have this section of 72 on glide. I could always turn around and land there, but I know that if I get too low in here, I won't be able to make it. So I'm taking every little climb that I can possibly find to make sure that I can finish this transition. And my goal is to get established onto Ralston Buttes, which is this feature right here. It usually works really well. And if I can just get onto this terrain, I can, even if it's not working well, I can usually scratch my way out to Coal Creek Canyon, which is this road right here. And then, like I mentioned about the Indian Head neighborhood, he's over here. So if you're going to get onto Ralston Buttes, make sure you stay high enough that you can either glide out to Coal Creek Canyon or get over into this Hanging Valley neighborhood up here. So I make it over to Ralston Buttes. Usually this works really well. Today I was finding it was not working as well as usual, though I did find a climb here that was a little bit broken. Some birds helped me map it out, and I decided to take the deeper line behind this neighborhood here, which is a little more friendly towards us. And right about now is when I started encountering a lot of wind out of the northeast, so I was now having to push a pretty hard headwind. And this spot this peak right here is Coal Creek Peak, and this transition is one of the last major cruxes. If you end up too low out here, it can be really hard to climb out. So you want to get high enough that you can transition and get, at least 2/3 of the way up Coal Creek Peak, so you have a little bit of altitude to work with. Fortunately, I get a lifty line, and as I come over here, usually this peak works really well for me. Not always, but a lot of times I get the best climb of the day on this. So I was hoping that either this sunny south face in the lee, because remember the wind is coming out of the northeast here, kind of off to my right side a little bit. I'm either hoping I'll find something good in the lee, or when I get on the windward side, I would pick up a climb, be able to surf it. Unfortunately, neither one really happened. It was lifty enough to maintain, but I never found a super good climb, so I just ended up kind of surfing along the Flatirons towards El Dorado Canyon. A lot of times I get something off this Flatiron feature here or right on the edge of Mickey Mouse Wall. Neither one was really working today. This is, of course, El Dorado Canyon State Park. This is Red Garden Wall. And all my bailout LZs now is all this stuff to the side, but my goal is to get high enough and make the transition to get onto the Flatirons, because especially with some kind of easterly component wind on the Flatirons, usually there's a ton of lift to be found. So as long as I can make it over there high enough, I'm pretty much home free. This is the last real crux to make it to Boulder. So I find a lifting line, get over on the Flatirons. Again, the day's been really stable so far, so I'm having to scratch a little more than I ideally wanted to because the air is kind of ratty. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that people fly this close if you don't have to, but I find a good climb here and I get out away from the terrain and nice and high. And once you're kind of at the height of Bear Peak, a lot of times you can just sort of surf along the Flatirons. And then the next LZ you have that's good to go is in-car. You can land on the south side of this road, anywhere in the grassy area. Maybe don't land in the parking lot, but they have typically been friendly to paragliders as long as you kind of keep to yourself over here. North of this, of course, is OSMP, where we do not have permission to land. And especially Chautauqua Park right here is a no-go. So your last really good place to tank up is usually over Green Mountain or over the first Flatiron. Often you find a good climb. Of course, is the theme for today. I wasn't finding a whole lot, so I went straight to Flagstaff where I saw some other gliders climbing, tried to find a little bit. But my ultimate goal was to make it to the hill where I saw a whole big gaggle of people flying, so I knew that there was lift out there if I could just make it to the hill. So here I'm passing Sanitas, and while you're making that transition from the first Flatiron over, if you can't make it to the hill, you do have North Boulder Park, which is fair game to land at. And just to back up a little bit to see what it looks like, when you are over at the Flatirons, North Boulder Park's right here. So once you get high enough, that's kind of in the back of your mind, your target of where you're going to go if you start hitting sink and you can't make it all the way to the hill. So let's fast forward a little bit, coming over Sanitas, trying to pick up some climbs and work my way back to the hill where there's a whole big gaggle of people that I can hopefully find my next climb with. And what I was noticing about this day is the further north I went, the more stable I was getting, the less high I was getting, which was consistent with the forecast. It showed that really the further north you went towards Boulder and past Boulder, it was going to get worse. And this is kind of where I started to make my real big mistake of the day, in that I had in my mind that I wanted to fly to Lions, that I was going to try to make this video to go all the way to Lions and get back, ideally. I had kind of thought to myself that the day was turning on and it was going to work out and I would find a climb, but the further north I went, the worse I got, and I got real low over McGuckin's factory and then basically ended up lawn darting out into the middle of nowhere next to this road. So hopefully in the future I'll be able to do more of these and show you the sections from Boulder to Lions and Boulder back to Golden. But hopefully people found this useful and know where the DNLs are and how to avoid them.